Thank you, everybody, for attending today's event, Improving Time to Value Through Omnichannel Engagement with Jay Filiantrault. This event is brought to you by the Operational Analytics Club. If you're a member of the club, great. If you're not, the Operational Analytics Club consists of over 2,000 data professionals and data-minded professionals like Jay, who might not have data in their title, but have been using data for years to help build, in his case, growth marketing, as well as people who have, helped build their customer success team, sales team, operations team, you name it. And today, Jay is going to demystify this phrase, omnichannel engagement, as well as teach us how we can implement it as data professionals in our organizations, as well as why it can be super valuable. So, with no further ado, Jay, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Parker, and thanks everybody for joining us today. Really excited to share some ideas and some past experiences and how to leverage data to make go-to-market teams more efficient, both through personalization, through process efficiency, to essentially drive more engagement in your application, improve your conversion rates for leads and prospects or trial signups. So really looking forward to diving into this. My name is Jay Filiatrault. I'm head of growth at Chameleon. Chameleon is a digital adoption platform. We essentially enable you to create in-product experiences layered on top of your UI. Some of the most common use cases are onboarding tours, feature adoption, new feature announcements, as well as getting feedback from users in context through microsurveys. I've been in B2B SaaS for over 12 years. Started off in sales, but quickly developed an interest for more of the revenue operations aspect of things. So set up a lot of go-to-market strategies in early stage B2B companies, and spend the last 4 years at a B2C company running a lifecycle marketing department. We had a freemium motion, and our team was essentially responsible for driving activation, driving conversion, upsell, and cross-sell for people who signed up to the free trial. And I've been at Chameleon now for 6 months. I was actually using Chameleon for 4 years at Lander previously, so that's kind of how I was introduced to the company. So today I'm gonna just walk through what my vision is of omnichannel and how it applies to B2B SaaS. When we think about omnichannel, we quite often think about having seamless experiences between in-store, email, website, more in the retail space. But I think there's definitely a lot of opportunity to think about omnichannel engagement in B2B SaaS. The channels might differ a little bit. We'll go into that. We'll talk about how optimizing your omnichannel communications and experiences will improve time to value, and what the compounding impact of improving time to value can be on the long term. And then we'll go through some very specific examples in the, pre-sales motions, how to increase sales velocity and conversion rates for prospects and trial users, and how to make your sales and marketing team more efficient. And then we'll walk through some examples of how to drive adoption and value realization for existing customers, or a lot of these can be applied to trial users as well. Really, the purpose for me in this webinar is for you to have some ideas and takeaways that you can take back to your organization to make you a better advisor to your go-to-market teams. So probably cover some things that you've already thought of in your organization, but hopefully you'll come out of this with a couple of new ideas that you can suggest to your teams, and see if there's a way to implement them and get benefit of the additional data points in CRM and marketing automation tools, so on and so forth. So as I was alluding to earlier, I think when we think about omnichannel engagement, it's pretty much all of the omnichannel engagement wheels we'll see on the internet are related to more of the brick and mortar space. A couple of opportunities to kind of rethink the way we frame this in B2B SaaS. We think about omnichannel engagement as having seamless experiences across all channels, communicating with users where they want to be engaged or where they're the most engaged. But I think as we think about that in the B2B space, we can start thinking about the different channels, like, you know, in e-commerce, for example, you have an email marketing channel, but in B2B, your CS teams reaching out to your customers through email, the sales teams reaching out to customers through email. You might have marketing emails for webinar announcements, new feature announcements, product marketing communications. So I would split that up into a lot of different categories. And I think another really important thing to call out is adapting your communications to the way your customers or your users like to learn. Actually, there's a really great interview with the head of growth at Airtable in Lenny's podcast from a few weeks ago, and they ran self-serve onboarding experiments for 18 months. Obviously, they have a very large number of signups, so they're able to iterate constantly and try a lot of different things. And they played around with like step-by-step guides in product, wizards to configure the first database when somebody gets started, revamping their help docs, having step-by-step videos, and personalizing based on use case, personalizing based on persona. And what they saw the greatest impact from was personalizing the onboarding to the channel or the format in which the end user prefers to learn. We've done some polls on that recently. Like 60% of users typically prefer step-by-step videos, whereas another like 25 or 30% prefer in-product step-by-step guides, and others just prefer to self-explore or go through help docs and have detailed instructions through help docs. So if we kind of go back to what I was recommending in terms of like breaking out the different channels in the B2B SaaS context. Obviously, we don't have brick and mortar spaces, so the in-person experience is not necessarily relevant. But I think we can break down a lot of the go-to-market communications into separate channels. They're often sent from different systems, different teams, not necessarily a cohesive strategy. Especially when it comes to post sales. Like I said earlier, there's marketing emails announcing new features, announcing an event, whereas you might have your sales team doing proactive recommendations to your customers on what features they might not be leveraging, or how to get more benefit with deeper use of existing features. Your existing customers will go through help docs. They might be receiving in-product nudges and guides on how to leverage features that they're not currently using, or how to use a new feature. So there's a lot of different formats that you can play with: email, in-product experiences, video, help docs, and there's a lot of opportunity to make the user experience cohesive. So if somebody viewed a help doc on a certain topic and they activated that feature, you obviously don't want to show them the in-product guide or the in-product nudge to activate that feature. And we'll go through some examples in that, but there's also the challenge of multi-user accounts. A lot of these actions are tracked on the individual user level, but they might be relevant to the other users within the organization. So we'll go through some examples in subsequent slides. So what is time to value? We typically think of time to value in the sense of how long does it take a new user or a new sign up to your platform to reach the aha moment. And the aha moment is quite often defined by activating a core feature. Sometimes you will see time to value or aha moments being defined in a little bit more of an advanced way, doing like regression analysis and understanding that doing these 3 core actions leads to a highly retained user at the 3-month or 6-month mark, for example. An example that comes to mind is Facebook to determine that inviting 7 friends after you create your Facebook account creates a lot of stickiness in the user experience. And that's one of the other really big takeaways that I have from that podcast with the head of growth at Airtable. They played around a lot with how they define their activation metrics or their aha moment. And they decided that it was better to tightened the criteria for what they consider activation, so it has a direct correlation to retention. If your aha moment or your activation criteria is configuring their profile or importing their first account list or product list in CSV format, yes, that drives activation, might actually drive conversion as well. But if they're not like doing their field mapping, if they're not customizing their flows and doing the more advanced setup, a few months down the road, they'll probably realize they're not getting full benefit out of the platform and really start to reconsider the spend. So probably better to have a definition of activation or the aha moment that is in the single digits, that is highly correlated to 3-month or 6-month retention, than have a simple activation metric, such as, like I said, importing your first product list, which is kind of table stakes and doesn't really enable the account or the end user to get full benefit out of the platform. Other ways I like to think about time to value in B2B SaaS is how quickly is a prospect able to evaluate the platform and understand whether it's a good fit for their use case and for their tech stack in the sales motions. So how quickly can we answer all the prospect questions, qualify them, determine that it's a fit, and create an opportunity? And then how quickly does that opportunity become value for our organization in terms of close won opportunities or close won deals? Another way to think about time to value is new users of existing customer accounts. I think that's something that's quite often overlooked when it comes to lifecycle marketing or driving adoption. We're very focused on the first user experience, converting trial users, ensuring that we're retaining new accounts that we're closing. But it's quite frequent for your champion or your main user to leave the organization and somebody to replace them and take over ownership of your platform. So I think having tailored onboarding flows to new users of existing accounts is really critical in helping them, first of all, understand what's happening in the platform, understanding the value the organization is currently getting, and what are the opportunities to continue optimizing and improving the use of the tool going forward. Same thing with new feature launches. Very similar to onboarding. Like when we launch a new feature, there's obviously a subset of users that is made for and that we expect to get value out of it. So how do we ensure that users are discovering the benefits of those new feature launches and activating the relevant features very quickly? And yeah, support resolution times, very important for the customer. If they have any issues, it's important for them to be able to get them resolved very quickly. So that's another way to think about time to value. And the impact of time to value obviously compounds over time. If you're getting your users to reach the aha moment in day one, for example, then that gives you an opportunity to teach them and show them the benefit of advanced features much quicker in the life cycle. So that'll have an impact on free trial conversion, your conversion of sales-led opportunities, which will have a compounding impact on top line revenue, obviously. And same thing when it goes to customer value realization. The compounding impact will be more on retention. So let's go into some specific examples here. We'll start with like pre-sales, top of funnel motions. I'm working on this a lot right now at Chameleon, so this is very, very top of mind. Some very simple stuff, like a lot of CRMs have a data source or integration for firmographic data, such as industry, employee count, funding amount, but the coverage is never as good as dedicated resources or dedicated platforms to that, such as Clearbit, Crunchbase, Built With, for example, for technographic information. So you'll quite often have a lack of coverage in default CRM fields for things that can be used for personalization as well as lead scoring. So lead scoring typically is two-pronged. Is the company the right fit based on employee count, based on funding level, based on industry, based on location potentially, based on technologies that they might be using, and then also what is the activity level? What's the intensity of the intent signal based on what pages they're viewing on your website? Are they checking out G2 alternative pages or category pages, so on and so forth. So ensuring data coverage will really help your go-to-market teams optimize their lead scoring to make sure that the majority of accounts have employee count and fundraising amount filled in, for example, and also provide a lot of opportunity to increase the coverage of personalization. A lot of our warm outbound campaigns that are led by sales are related to the technographics of the company. One of our competitive advantages is the breadth of integrations that we have to like best in breed analytics tools or reverse ETL tools like Census, for example. So it's important for us to be able to identify which companies are leveraging these tools and make recommendations on which integrations that they might want to leverage within Chameleon based on the relevant tech that's part of their stack. The other thing that's very challenging in a lot of CRMs is factoring in events. So if you have a product-led motion and you want to bubble up the people that are best fit and also the most active in trials for sales to reach out and try to nudge, it's important to be able to factor the engagement with your platform, and that quite often is hard to do using events in CRM. So I think a big opportunity for reverse ETL tools like Census is to do a lot of crunching and summarizing of these activities and passing them to the CRM as a user property or an account property, rather than trying to build workflows and logic around events in the CRM. Some very basic examples of that would be like date of last login, number of CSV imports if your tool is managing inventory or managing accounts, for example. In our case, it would be number of experiences that have been activated, what integrations have been activated. And these obviously should all be managed on the account level. Like if I have a colleague of mine who sets up the Census integration, it's not relevant to nudge me to set up the Census integration for our account. So that's another way that I think reverse ETL becomes really valuable. Typically, event instrumentation is done on the account level. If you don't have group calls set up, you can associate a lot of those event summaries to each of the users that are part of the accounts to make sure that you're keeping your nudges, whether it be through email, through in-app, hyper relevant to all the users of the account. If you have any questions or you want me to go into more detail on any of this, please feel free to drop that in the chat. I'm gonna go quickly because we're already at the 25-minute mark. But this is a good example of something you can do in the pre-sales motion. Here we're basically serving a side pop on our website to accounts that are currently owned by a BDR in the organization and that are a very high fit. So only ICP accounts that are currently being prospected by an SDR. It's very common for people to forward emails or just talk about the opportunity or the platform internally. So we might not necessarily be communicating with the person who's responsible for evaluating a tool like Chameleon. So it's a good way to catch them and try to drive a little bit more turnover from our prospecting motions by personalizing the experience based on account ownership and also the lead scoring or fit scoring in this case. I talked about some of these examples already for customer marketing, but essentially what I was referring to earlier is syncing account data to users. So whether that be related to any configuration items, setting your brand styling, setting your account permissions, configuring your field mapping, installing integrations or setting up integrations. Those should be tracked on each individual user within the account. So again, you're not suggesting things that have already been done by another user within the organization. Your customer marketing team, lifecycle marketing, customer success, growth, whoever's responsible for driving long-term adoption and engagement in the platform can also leverage a lot of the enrichment data that I was referring to earlier, such as technologies from Clearbit or built with. For example, HubSpot is not really good at identifying some of the analytics providers like Heap, but in Apollo, our prospecting tool, they're able to identify Heap. So just backfilling or centralizing all that information in the technologies field in your CRM will enable all your go-to-market teams to leverage it for personalization and make sure that you're making hyper-relevant recommendations based on the current technologies that people are using, or based on the number of employees that the company has, or tailoring some of the communications based on their industry as well. I'm going to save content recommendations and perceived value through account summaries for very concrete examples that I want to walk through in the last couple of minutes. This is a very basic example of how to optimize engagement based on firmographics. Pitch, announce multiple new integrations in this email, but there's an opportunity to bubble up. There's an opportunity to prioritize or make the integrations that are part of the existing customer stack at the top, for example, or suggest those in the subject line so you get better open rate because the integration that's being introduced is hyper relevant to the organization in question. This is something that we put in place at my previous company, Lander. It was a platform for music producers. So there was a lot of content. It was basically a sample marketplace. But I think you can flip this, or you can leverage the same approach for potentially blog categories or different categories. Different categories of content. So it's kind of a way to build a recommendation engine without actually implementing machine learning and having a true recommendation tool. But essentially just incrementing, we used to call it genre affinity score for the genre of music that they were making at Lander. But it could be content affinity score if you're looking to suggest the most relevant new blog post in a specific category from your blog. So a very simple way to do this is, like on the Chameleon blog, everything is categorized. You can see the category, so PLG, product-led growth, versus feature adoption versus road mapping in the URL. So we can create basically a formula that increments a property for content affinity score PLG. We started at everybody had a score of 0.5 at Lander for each of the 10 genres that we wanted to rank. And then if they view a blog post in the PLG category, we increment their score by 4%. And then we decay that score on a weekly or monthly basis, just to make sure if they're working on a specific project that's related to PLG, but it's not the core of their interest or related to their role, that score increments over time and doesn't factor in that one-time project that they were working on. So you have scores for each of your 5 blog categories, for example, and then you can create another workflow that is going to rank those scores in order and print the preferred content affinity score or category, in this case, into another field. And that can be leveraged by your marketing, your growth team, to customize what type of content that you're recommending to the user. Very basic example here, but I think we can often underappreciate or overlook the potential lift of doing very basic personalization can have on engagement and activation. Again, at Lander, we had a mastering service, so people would upload their song for mastering, which is kind of the final step of polish before you release a track. And we wanted to suggest that they distribute the track to the streaming platforms after they've mastered it. So we had a very basic email that said your mastered track is ready to release, and had like a 40% open rate, something like a 2% conversion to actually distributing the song. But we were capturing the file name, so the song name on the upload of the track. So by simply changing the subject line to get jiggy with it is ready to release versus your track is ready to release, the open rate increased by 50%. We went from low 40s to mid 60% and had a 50%, an equivalent increase in distribution conversion to distributing that song. So maybe a missed opportunity on customer IO's part to not leverage the file name in the subject line. Just get more eyeballs on the contents of the email if they did. A much more advanced way to do this, or maybe a more advanced play that I would invite you to consider, is something that's inspired by Spotify Wrapped. I'm sure everybody's familiar with this. It's it's a viral topic every single year since they've been doing it. And I actually know a few people who stay on Spotify just because they get their Spotify Wrapped and they get stats on their listening habits. But what if we were to try to do that in B2B? This is an example of an email that we got from one of our current providers at Chameleon. And sorry for all the redactions, but there was environment names in there. Just want to make sure that not sharing any secure information, but essentially a summary of the value realized by the organization from your platform. So in the case of Chameleon, we show in product experiences, maybe we tell them what percentage of their monthly active users have been served an experience, what percentage of those users actually completed a step-by-step guide or a Chameleon experience that was meant to drive them towards feature adoption. In this case, we're getting a summary of the cost savings or the time savings that Judo Scale provided by auto scaling our server environments. So determine what value metrics could be leveraged to drive value perception with your existing user base, and then you can build account level properties for these metrics and do similar manipulation as I was recommending potentially in the content affinity score, or summarizing events so you get the number of interactions on a monthly basis. In this case, I'm assuming they assigned a certain value to the amount of times that a server was spun up to auto scale. This is a great way, I think, to remind your users and your customers of the value that they're getting out of your platform on a regular basis, outside of the QBRs that are being run by CSMs, for example. Cool. So I hope there's some ideas here that you can take away to the organization. Happy to, we have a few minutes left if anybody has questions, wants me to go into more detail about how I've implemented this, or...
I have a quick question. So on that last slide, you showed just an example of how to personalize an email to increase open rates pretty dramatically, like if it's set up right and done right. And when you set it up at your current company or your previous one, what was the biggest barrier when working with your data team? Like, what part of it was you had anticipated to be easy but wasn't, or was any insights there?
Well, in the case of the Lander example, it was really simple because we were simply we were pulling the event property and leveraging that in the subject line as a mail merge field. I think if we look at the example though of the Judo Scale email, the biggest challenge would be getting those usage summaries into your marketing automation or your CRM, because most of them are not able to do downstream aggregation and summarize events. There's some exceptions out there, like Customer IO, for example. It's very, very capable in that sense. But that's typically a very big challenge when it comes to deploying an email like this, but also just understanding the health of your current customers, for example.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And we'll stay on for a couple more minutes if anybody has questions for Jay. And this is recorded and we're sending it to everybody. So don't worry if you miss something, you will get it later this afternoon.
Awesome. And if any questions come up after the fact, you can contact me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn profile is here.
And again, if you are a member of the OA Club already, great. Thank you very much. If you're not, you can join in the link at the top of your screen. And if you have any more questions for Jay, you can talk to him in there or reach him on LinkedIn or his email address that you just mentioned. So have a great day, everybody.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for joining, everyone. Have a great day.
See ya.